Hey everybody, it's Jen. I'm going to talk about how to find the average using fractions, which is something that you might see show up on the final exam as we're talking about fractions. So the good news is that this is not a new process at all. We've done averages before in the last 2 units, and we're not adding any new math here. We just have to consider our steps a little more because we're dealing with fractions. And whenever we have to add and divide with fractions, we add some steps. So let's review what the steps are to find an average first. When I find an average, first I add up all of the numbers that I want to find the average of, and then I divide that sum by the number of numbers. So if I'm finding the average of 5 numbers, I'm going to divide by 5. So when we're dealing with finding the average of fractions, so let's just start with, I want to find the average of 1/2, 2/3, and 3/4. Okay. So the steps will stay the same. I'm going to add these numbers up together. And then after I added them, I would divide them by 3. Since I'm dealing with fractions, I'm going to have to start by finding common denominators for all of my fractions. So I'm going to rewrite them top to bottom, because it's easier for me to work with them this way. And then I'm going to find common denominators. So I'm looking for a least common multiple of 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to start by counting by 4s to see if I can find a common denominator that way. So my first one is 4, but of course 3 doesn't go evenly into 4. So my next try would be maybe 8. And 2 will go into 8, but 3 doesn't, so that's not a multiple of 3. Next, I get 12. Well, 12 is a multiple of 3. If I counted by 3s, I'd get 3, 6, 9, and then I'd get out to 12. And 2, of course, goes into 12 because it's even. So I'm going to end up using 12 as my common denominator for all of these numbers. And so my next step now is to change them all into 12ths. So I know that to get to 12, I have to multiply by 6 on the top and the bottom. Helps if I multiply right, huh? So I get 6/12 plus 3 times 4 is 12, so I'm going to multiply by 4 on the top, and I get 8/12. And down here, 4 times 3 is 12, so I multiply the top by 3 as well, and I get 9/12. Okay, so now this is addition I can do straight across the top. Remember, 6 plus 8 is 14, and 14 plus 9 is 23. So my answer is 23/12 is all of those added together. But remember, I have one more step. I now have to divide in order to find the average. So let me clear this screen off and we'll divide. Okay, so now I'm going to, remember I had 23/12. And I need to divide it by the original number of numbers I had, which was 3. And in order to do that, I've got to turn 3 into a fraction, so I get 3/1. And then remember, dividing with fractions, my first step is to flip this number, find the reciprocal. So it becomes 1/3. I'm going to change my symbol to multiply. And so now I have 23/12 times 1/3. And I multiply straight across, I get 23/12 times 3 is 36. And then my last step with all fraction problems, I'm going to look and see if I can simplify. Here, I know that 23 is a prime number, which means nothing else goes into it evenly, so there's no simplifying I can do. So my average of 1/2, 2/3, and 3/4 is 23/36. So let's look at those steps again. Remember, first we are going to add our numbers together, and with fractions that requires finding common denominators and then adding. And if you can at that point, you're going to simplify because it'll make your life easier. And then we divide that number by the number of original numbers we had, and that's how we find our average. I'll do a little bit more complex one in the next video. Let me know if you have any questions.